The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the dusty streets of San Bernardino, California, followed by her mother's voice shrieking words that would brand themselves into Lucy's memory forever. "Get out and never come back, you shameful girl." It was August 1878, and Lucy Daniels found herself standing in the scorching afternoon sun with nothing but the thin cotton dress on her back and worn shoes that had seen better days. Her father had died of influenza 3 months prior, leaving her mother to marry a harsh man named Gerald Pritchard within weeks, a union that had transformed their modest home into a battlefield. Lucy had refused Gerald's eldest son's persistent and unwanted advances, and when she finally slapped him across the face that morning after he cornered her in the root cellar, she sealed her fate. Her mother, desperate to preserve her new marriage and the financial security it provided, had chosen her stepfamily over her own daughter. Lucy walked down the dirt road leading away from the only home she had ever known, her throat tight with unshed tears and her stomach hollow with hunger. She had not eaten since the previous evening, and the relentless California sun beat down mercilessly on her dark blonde hair. The town of San Bernardino stretched before her, a collection of wooden buildings and canvas tents that had grown substantially since the railroad arrived. Cowboys, miners, merchants, and drifters filled the streets, their eyes following her as she passed. A young woman alone with no belongings was a curiosity at best and a target at worst. Her feet carried her toward the edge of town where she had no plan and no destination. Panic began to claw at her chest as the reality of her situation settled in. She had no money, no food, no shelter, and night would fall in a few hours. The desert could be brutal after dark, with temperatures dropping sharply and dangers multiplying in the shadows. She thought briefly of throwing herself on the mercy of the church, but Reverend Michaels was known for his strict moral judgments, and she feared he would simply send her back to her mother or worse, to the workhouse in Los Angeles. Lucy found herself near the livery stable at the far end of town, her legs trembling from exhaustion and dehydration. She leaned against a fence post, closing her eyes against the spinning world. That was when she heard his voice, deep and tinged with concern. "Madam, you look about ready to fall over." She opened her eyes to find a tall man standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and striking blue eyes that held genuine worry. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, dusty denim trousers, a worn shirt, and a bandana tied loosely around his neck. A horse stood behind him, a beautiful chestnut mare with intelligent eyes. "I'm fine," Lucy managed to say, though her voice came out weaker than she intended. "With respect, madam, you don't look fine. When's the last time you had water?" She tried to remember and realized she could not. The man stepped closer, pulling a canteen from his saddle and offering it to her. "Here, drink slow now or you'll make yourself sick." Lucy hesitated, years of warnings about strangers warring with her desperate thirst. The man seemed to understand her reluctance. "Name's Wade Cooper. I work the cattle ranch about 5 miles north of town. I'm not going to hurt you, I promise, but you need water." Something in his steady gaze convinced her. Lucy took the canteen with shaking hands and sipped the cool water, forcing herself to follow his advice despite wanting to gulp it down. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered, handing it back. Wade studied her for a long moment, taking in her lack of belongings, her worn dress, and the fear she could not quite hide. "Are you in trouble?" The kindness in his question broke something loose inside her, and before she could stop herself, the whole story came tumbling out. She told him about her father's death, her mother's hasty remarriage, the son's harassment and her banishment. She expected judgment or pity, but Wade's expression darkened with anger on her behalf. "That's not right," he said firmly. "None of that is your fault, and you did nothing wrong defending yourself." "My mother doesn't see it that way," Lucy said bitterly. Wade replaced his hat and looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I live alone in a ranch house my uncle left me when he passed last year. It's got 3 bedrooms and more space than one man needs. My home is your home now if you'll accept the offer. No strings attached, no expectations. Just a safe place to stay until you figure out what you want to do." Lucy stared at him in shock. "You don't even know me." "I know you're in need and I have the means to help. That's enough." Wade's voice was gentle but resolute. "I won't leave you out here with nowhere to go. It wouldn't be right, and my mama raised me better than that." "People will talk," Lucy said, though hope was beginning to bloom in her chest. "People always talk. Let them. The only thing that matters is you're safe." Wade gestured to his horse. "Rosie here can carry us both. The ranch isn't fancy, but it's solid and there's plenty of food. You can have the room that belonged to my aunt. It's got a door that locks from the inside, and I give you my word I'll respect your privacy." Lucy searched his face for any sign of deception or hidden motives, but found only sincere concern. She was out of options, and this man, this stranger named Wade Cooper, was offering her exactly what she needed most. A chance. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you." Relief washed over Wade's features. He helped her mount Rosie, then swung up behind her, careful to keep a respectful distance. As they rode out of San Bernardino, Lucy glanced back once at the town that held her old life. She felt no regret, only a strange sense of freedom mixed with uncertainty about what lay ahead. The journey to Wade's ranch took nearly an hour. They rode through scrubland dotted with Joshua trees and sage brush, the landscape harsh but beautiful in its own way. The San Bernardino Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding patches of snow despite the summer heat. Wade kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the ranch. He had 70 head of cattle, a small herd compared to some of the bigger operations, but enough to make a decent living. He also kept chickens, a milk cow named Bessie, and a vegetable garden that he admitted he was terrible at maintaining. "My Aunt Clara used to handle all the gardening," Wade explained. "She had a gift for making things grow. I mostly manage to keep the plants alive, but they don't exactly thrive under my care." "I used to help my father with our garden," Lucy offered, "before he got sick." "Then maybe you can work some magic on mine," Wade said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise. It was a single-story structure built from wood and adobe, with a covered porch that wrapped around the front and side. A barn stood nearby, weathered but sturdy, along with a chicken coop and various outbuildings. It was modest but well-maintained, and Lucy felt something inside her settle at the sight of it. Wade helped her down from Rosie and led her inside. The interior was clean but clearly the domain of a bachelor. The furniture was practical rather than decorative, and there was a notable absence of curtains or any soft touches. The kitchen was tidy, dishes washed and put away, and a large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main living area. "Your room is this way," Wade said, leading her down a short hallway. He opened a door to reveal a modest bedroom with a single bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a small window that looked out toward the mountains. "Like I said, the lock works. And there's water in the pitcher. I'll need to draw more from the well, but that should be enough for now." Lucy stepped into the room, hardly believing this was real. A bed, a locked door, safety. "It's perfect." Wade shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncertain. I imagine you're hungry. I'll fix us some supper. Nothing fancy, just beans and cornbread, but it's filling. You take your time and come out when you're ready." He closed the door behind him, and Lucy sank onto the bed, finally allowing the tears she had been holding back to fall. She cried for her father, for her mother's betrayal, for the fear and uncertainty of the past hours. But underneath the grief was a fragile thread of gratitude for this unexpected kindness from a stranger who asked nothing in return. After washing her face and hands in the basin, Lucy ventured out to the main room. Wade was at the stove, stirring a pot of beans while cornbread baked in the oven. He had changed into a clean shirt and his dark hair was damp, suggesting he had cleaned up as well. "Anything I can do to help?" Lucy asked. Wade turned and smiled at her. "You can set the table if you like. Plates are in that cabinet there, and utensils in the drawer." They worked in companionable silence, and soon they were seated across from each other at the simple wooden table. The food was indeed basic, but it was hot and plentiful, and Lucy realized she was ravenous. Wade watched with satisfaction as she ate, refilling her plate without comment when she finished the first helping. "This is very good," Lucy said honestly. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "There's nothing to repay," Wade said firmly. "But if you want to help around the place, I won't say no. Like I mentioned, the garden could use a woman's touch, and if you can cook better than I can, that would be a blessing. But those are offers, not obligations. You're welcome here regardless." "I want to help," Lucy said quickly. "I can't just accept charity without contributing something." Wade nodded. "All right then. We'll figure it out as we go. For now, you should rest. You've had about the worst day a person can have." Lucy helped him clean up the supper dishes, learning where things belonged in the kitchen. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Wade lit several oil lamps around the house. "I usually turn in fairly early," he said. "Got to be up before dawn to tend the cattle, but you can stay up as long as you like. There are some books on that shelf if you're a reader. They were my aunt's mostly, but there are a few of my uncle's too." "I love to read," Lucy said, surprised to see a small collection of volumes. Her own family had only owned a Bible and a farmer's almanac. "Help yourself to any of them." Wade paused, then added, "I'm glad you're here, Lucy. I know the circumstances are terrible, but I want you to know you're not a burden. This house has been too quiet since my aunt and uncle passed. It's good to have another soul around." The sincerity in his words warmed her more than the food had. "Good night, Wade, and thank you again." "Good night." Lucy retreated to her room, selected a book from the shelf, a collection of poetry she would never have been allowed to read at home, and settled onto the bed. She read by lamplight until her eyes grew heavy, then changed into a nightgown that Wade had thoughtfully left folded on the dresser. It had belonged to his aunt and was a bit large, but it was clean and soft. She locked the door as Wade had suggested, not because she feared him, but because the act of securing herself in gave her a sense of control she desperately needed. That night, she slept more soundly than she had in months. The next morning, Lucy woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and sunlight streaming through her window. She dressed quickly in her same worn dress, making a mental note that she would need to figure out the clothing situation soon, and ventured into the main room. Wade was already gone, but he had left the stove banked with coals and a note on the table. "Good morning. Help yourself to anything in the pantry. I will be back around noon. Wade." Lucy smiled at the careful handwriting and set about exploring the kitchen. She found flour, sugar, eggs from the chickens, milk from Bessie, and various other staples. By the time Wade returned, dusty and tired, she had baked fresh bread, prepared a hearty stew, and tidied the main living areas. Wade stopped in the doorway, staring at the transformed space. "I've been gone 4 hours. How did you do all this?" Lucy felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I hope you don't mind. I just wanted to help." "Mind, this is amazing." Wade walked to the pot of stew and breathed in deeply. "That smells incredible, and bread, real bread." "It needs to cool a bit more, but yes." Wade looked at her with something like awe. "Lucy Daniels, you're a miracle worker." Over the next few days, they fell into a comfortable routine. Wade would rise early to tend the cattle, check the fences, and handle the dozens of tasks that came with running a ranch. Lucy took over the household duties, cooking meals that made Wade declare her the best cook in San Bernardino County, tending the chickens and Bessie, and beginning the work of rehabilitating the neglected garden. She also began making necessary repairs to the house, sewing curtains from fabric she found in a trunk that had belonged to Clara, and adding small touches that made the space feel more like a home. On the fourth day, Wade rode into town and returned with several parcels. "I hope I got the sizes right," he said, looking embarrassed as he handed them to Lucy. "You can't keep wearing the same dress every day, and I figured you might need some other things too." Lucy opened the packages to find 3 new dresses, one practical calico for everyday wear, one in a soft blue cotton, and one in deep green that was finer than anything she had ever owned. There were also undergarments, stockings, a pair of sturdy boots, a sunbonnet, and a warm shawl for cool evenings. "Wade, this is too much," she protested, even as she held the blue dress up to herself. "It's not too much, it's what you need." Wade cleared his throat. "I also stopped by the general store and told Mrs. Henderson that my cousin was staying with me while she recovered from a family tragedy. It seemed like a story that would satisfy the gossips without inviting too many questions." Lucy understood immediately. He was protecting her reputation and giving her a legitimate reason to be living at his ranch. That was thoughtful. "I figure if anyone asks you directly, you can say your cousin Wade took you in. It's close enough to the truth." As the days turned into weeks, Lucy found herself settling into life at the ranch in ways she had never expected. The work was hard but satisfying, and she discovered a talent for managing the household that had been stifled in her mother's home. She expanded the garden, planted herbs, and even started a small flower bed near the porch. The chickens thrived under her care, producing more eggs than the 2 of them could eat, so she began preserving them in a solution of water glass she made following Clara's old recipes. Wade, for his part, was everything his first impression had promised. He was kind, respectful, hardworking, and possessed a quiet sense of humor that often caught her by surprise. He never pressed her for more details about her family, never made her feel like a charity case, and never once made her uncomfortable. If anything, he seemed to go out of his way to ensure she felt safe and valued. One evening in late September, they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The air had finally begun to cool as autumn approached, and Lucy had her new shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "I've been thinking," Wade said, his voice careful. "Winter will be here before we know it, and I was planning to butcher one of the steers in November. We could smoke some of the meat, sell some in town, and keep enough for us to get through the cold months. But I was also thinking we might want to lay in some extra supplies. Flour, sugar, coffee, things like that, just to be safe." "That sounds sensible," Lucy agreed. "I can make preserves from the vegetables, and I saw some wild grape vines near the creek that should be ready for picking soon." "You've done so much already," Wade said, turning to look at her. "The ranch hasn't run this smoothly since my uncle was alive. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't agreed to come here." "I think that's my line," Lucy said softly. You saved my life, Wade. You saved mine too in a different way. Wade held her gaze, and Lucy felt something shift between them, a recognition of feelings that had been growing quietly over the past weeks. I like having you here, Lucy. Not just because you're a good cook and the house is cleaner than it's ever been. I like talking to you in the evenings. I like hearing you sing while you work in the garden. I like knowing you're here when I come back from the pastures. Lucy's heart began to race. I like being here. I like the life we've built together. Lucy, I need to be honest with you about something. Wade took a deep breath. When I first offered you a place to stay, it was purely to help someone in need. But over these weeks, you've become so much more than a person I was helping. You've become my friend, and if I'm being completely truthful, I've developed feelings for you that go beyond friendship. Wade, Lucy whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. I'm not asking for anything, Wade said quickly. I know you've been through a terrible ordeal, and the last thing I want is to make you feel pressured or uncomfortable. I just needed you to know how I feel. If you don't feel the same way, that's all right. Nothing has to change. You still have a home here for as long as you want it. Lucy reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the porch railing. I do feel the same way. I have for a while now, but I was afraid to say anything. I didn't want you to think I was trying to trap you, or that I was only returning your feelings out of gratitude. Wade turned his hand over to clasp hers properly. Is it gratitude? No, Lucy said firmly. I admire you, Wade Cooper. I admire your kindness, your integrity, your work ethic, and your gentle heart. I admire how you treat your animals, how you speak about your aunt and uncle, how you've never once made me feel like I owe you anything. I think you're the finest man I've ever known, and I care for you deeply. Wade's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Can I court you properly then? Do this the right way. I would like that very much. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, and Lucy felt warmth spread through her entire body. This was so different from the crude advances of Gerald's son, or the cold practicality of her mother's new marriage. This was genuine and sweet, and made her feel cherished. Over the following weeks, Wade courted Lucy with a combination of old-fashioned propriety and genuine affection. He brought her wildflowers from the pastures, taught her to ride Rosie, and spent their evenings reading aloud to her from his uncle's collection of adventure novels. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing their hopes and dreams, their fears and regrets. Lucy told him about her father and the happy childhood she had enjoyed before his death. Wade shared memories of his aunt and uncle, who had raised him after his own parents died of cholera when he was 12. They gave me everything, Wade said one evening as they washed the supper dishes together. Uncle James taught me about ranching, about being a man of my word. Aunt Clara taught me about kindness, about seeing people's hearts rather than their circumstances. They showed me what a good marriage looked like, how partners support each other and build a life together. They sound wonderful, Lucy said. They were. I think they would have liked you very much. Wade dried a plate and set it aside. Clara especially would have appreciated how you've brought life back to her garden and her home. In October, Wade took Lucy into town for the first time since she had arrived at the ranch. She wore her green dress and felt more confident than she had in months. Mrs. Henderson at the general store greeted them warmly, expressing sympathy for Lucy's family troubles and commenting on how well she looked despite her ordeal. Other townspeople were equally kind, and Lucy realized that Wade's story had been accepted without question. His reputation in the community was solid, and people trusted his word. They purchased supplies for the coming winter, and Wade insisted on buying Lucy a warm wool coat in deep blue that matched her eyes. They also stopped by the church, where Reverend Michaels greeted them cordially. Wade introduced Lucy using the cousin's story, and the Reverend welcomed her to the community, inviting them both to Sunday services. On the ride back to the ranch, Lucy felt lighter than she had in years. "Thank you for today. It felt good to be out in the world again, to not be hiding." "You have nothing to hide from," Wade said. "You're a good woman who was treated badly by people who should have protected you. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your concern." As autumn deepened, the ranch prepared for winter. Wade butchered the steer as planned, and Lucy worked tirelessly to smoke and preserve the meat. She made sausages, canned vegetables, put up preserves, and pickled everything she could. The pantry and root cellar filled with their stores, satisfying proof of their hard work. One chilly November evening, Wade came in from the barn to find Lucy mending one of his shirts by lamplight, a task she had taken on without being asked. She had also started knitting him a scarf from wool yarn she had bought in town, working on it in the evenings when she thought he was not watching. "Lucy, can we talk?" Wade asked, his voice serious. She set aside her mending, her heart suddenly racing. "Of course. Is something wrong?" Wade sat down across from her, his hands clasped between his knees. "Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just that I've been thinking about our situation, about the future." "All right," Lucy said carefully. "We've been living under the same roof for 3 months now," Wade continued. "And while I know everyone believes you're my cousin, we both know the truth. More than that, we both know what we feel for each other." "Yes," Lucy whispered. "I love you," Wade said simply. "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I love your strength, your resilience, your kindness, and your laughter. I love how you sing to the chickens and how you always save the best pieces of meat for me at supper. I love how you look in the morning with the sun in your hair and how you fall asleep reading in the chair by the fire. I love everything about you, Lucy Daniels." Tears sprang to Lucy's eyes. "I love you too, Wade, so very much." Wade slid from his chair to kneel in front of her. "Then marry me. Not because you need a home or because it's the practical thing to do, but because we love each other and want to build a life together. Marry me and be my wife, my partner, my everything." "Yes," Lucy said through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." Wade pulled her into his arms and they held each other tightly, both overwhelmed by the enormity of what they had found together. When Wade finally pulled back, he was smiling through his own tears. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He produced a simple gold band that glinted in the lamplight. "This was Aunt Clara's wedding ring. Uncle James gave it to me before he died and told me to give it to the woman I loved when the time came. I think Clara would be happy knowing you're wearing it." Lucy held out her trembling hand, and Wade slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in San Bernardino. Mrs. Henderson and her husband stood as witnesses, along with a few other townspeople who had befriended them. Lucy wore her green dress, and Wade wore his best suit, his dark hair neatly combed and his blue eyes shining with love and joy. Reverend Michaels performed the ceremony with warmth and sincerity, speaking about the sanctity of marriage and the blessing of finding true love. When he pronounced them husband and wife, and told Wade he could kiss his bride, Lucy felt as if her heart might burst from happiness. Wade's kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise for their future together. The townspeople threw a small celebration for them at the church hall, with Mrs. Henderson providing a cake and other women contributing dishes. It was simple but heartfelt, and Lucy was moved by how the community had embraced her. No one mentioned her past or asked uncomfortable questions. She was simply Wade Cooper's wife, and that was enough. That night, they returned to the ranch as husband and wife. Wade carried Lucy over the threshold, both of them laughing at the old tradition. He set her down gently in the main room, which she had decorated with candles and late-season flowers from the garden. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cooper," Wade said softly. "It's been my home since the first day you brought me here," Lucy replied. "But now it's complete." Their wedding night was everything Lucy had hoped it would be, tender and loving, with Wade showing her what true intimacy meant between two people who loved and respected each other. He was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished every moment. Afterward, they lay in each other's arms in Wade's bed, which was now their bed, talking quietly about their hopes for the future. "I want children," Lucy admitted. "Someday when the time is right. I want to fill this house with love and laughter." "I want that too," Wade said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "As many as you're willing to give me. This ranch will be their legacy, a place they can be proud of." "We'll need to expand the garden even more," Lucy said, already planning. "And maybe add on to the house. Another bedroom or two," Wade chuckled. "How many children are you planning on?" "I don't know. Let's just see what God blesses us with and go from there." The winter that followed was cold but happy. Wade and Lucy settled into married life with the same ease they had found living together before. The only difference was the depth of intimacy they now shared, both physical and emotional. They were true partners in every sense, working together to maintain the ranch and prepare for spring. Lucy discovered she was pregnant in late February. She had suspected for a few weeks, but waited to be certain before telling Wade. When she finally shared the news one evening after supper, Wade's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests, and then very carefully set her down as if she might break. "We're having a baby," he kept repeating, wonder in his voice. "We're going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Lucy asked, though his reaction left little doubt. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," Wade said, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "This is everything I've ever wanted. A wife I love, a child on the way, a good life we've built together. I'm the luckiest man alive." Wade became even more protective and attentive as Lucy's pregnancy progressed. He insisted she not overwork herself, though Lucy laughingly reminded him that ranch women had been having babies while doing chores for generations. Still, she appreciated his concern and allowed him to take over some of the heavier tasks she had been managing. In March, a letter arrived that surprised them both. It was from Lucy's mother, forwarded through Mrs. Henderson, who apparently knew where Lucy had ended up despite the cousin's story. The letter was brief and stilted, informing Lucy that her mother had left Gerald Pritchard after discovering he had been stealing from her late husband's business accounts. She was now living with her sister in Los Angeles and had heard through the local gossip network that Lucy had married well. She wanted to know if Lucy would be willing to correspond with her. Lucy read the letter several times, her emotions complex and conflicting. Wade sat beside her, offering silent support while she processed. "What do you want to do?" he finally asked. "I don't know," Lucy admitted. "Part of me is still so angry at her for choosing him over me, for throwing me out with nothing. But another part of me remembers the mother she was before my father died, when she was happy and loving." "You don't have to decide right now," Wade said. "Take your time and think about what's best for you and for our family." Lucy eventually decided to write back, though she kept her letter brief. She acknowledged her mother's situation and informed her of her marriage and pregnancy, but made it clear that rebuilding their relationship would take time and effort on both sides. She did not invite her mother to visit, but left the door open for future communication. "I'm not ready to forgive her completely," Lucy told Wade. "But I also don't want to carry this anger forever. Maybe someday we can find our way back to each other." "That's very mature of you," Wade said, pulling her close. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." As spring arrived, the ranch came alive with new growth. The garden flourished under Lucy's care, the cattle gave birth to healthy calves, and Lucy's own body continued to change as their child grew within her. Wade marveled at every development, talking to her belly at night and making plans for their son or daughter. "I hope the baby has your eyes," Lucy said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "I hope the baby has your kindness," Wade countered, "and your strength." "You're the strongest person I know, Lucy." Their daughter was born on a warm October evening in 1879, exactly 1 year after Wade had proposed. The birth was attended by Mrs. Henderson, who had served as midwife for half the women in San Bernardino County, and another experienced woman from town. Wade paced anxiously in the main room, jumping at every sound, until Mrs. Henderson finally called him in to meet his daughter. Lucy was exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in the blanket she had been knitting for months. Wade approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the red-faced infant who was making small, mewing sounds. "She's perfect," he breathed. "Absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold her?" Lucy asked. Wade carefully took his daughter into his arms, and Lucy watched as this strong, capable man transformed into a soft-hearted father before her eyes. He gazed at the baby with such love and wonder that Lucy felt tears spring to her eyes all over again. "What should we name her?" Wade asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their daughter, Lucy knew exactly what felt right. "Clara," she said. "After your aunt, Clara Rose Cooper." Wade looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. Clara Rose. She would have been so honored. Baby Clara was a good-natured child who seemed to inherit the best qualities of both her parents. She had Wade's blue eyes and Lucy's blonde hair, along with a sunny disposition that made her a joy to care for. Wade was utterly devoted to his daughter, rushing home from the pastures to spend time with her and insisting on taking his share of the nighttime feedings, even though he was up before dawn every morning. "She's my daughter, too," he said, when Lucy protested that he needed his sleep. "I'm not going to miss out on any part of her life." As Clara grew, the ranch continued to prosper. Wade's careful management and Lucy's thrifty household skills meant they were able to save money and make improvements. They added 2 more bedrooms to the house, expanded the barn, and increased their cattle herd to nearly 100 head. They also hired a young ranch hand named Tommy, who helped Wade with the heavier work and slept in a small bunkhouse Wade built for that purpose. When Clara was 2, Lucy discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect and was not doing as much heavy work with Tommy helping out. Their son was born in the spring of 1882, a healthy, squalling infant with dark hair like his father and a powerful set of lungs. "What do you think of William?" Wade suggested as they admired their son. "We could call him Will." "William James Cooper," Lucy said, adding Wade's uncle's name. "It's perfect." Will proved to be more challenging than Clara had been, demanding attention and quick to cry when he was unhappy. But he was also full of personality, making his parents laugh with his expressions and antics even as they walked the floor with him at night. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, providing a good living for the Cooper family. Clara and Will thrived, growing into bright, loving children who adored their parents and each other. Wade and Lucy's love deepened with each passing year, their partnership strong and their commitment to each other unwavering, When Clara was 6 and Will was 4, Lucy received another letter from her mother. This one was different from the previous sporadic correspondence. Her mother wrote that she had been diagnosed with a serious illness and wanted to see Lucy and meet her grandchildren before it was too late. She did not ask for forgiveness or make excuses for her past behavior, but simply expressed a sincere desire to know the family Lucy had built. Lucy discussed it at length with Wade, who left the decision entirely up to her. In the end, Lucy decided that life was too short for old grudges and that her mother deserved a chance to know her grandchildren. She wrote back, inviting her mother to visit the ranch. Margaret Daniels arrived in late summer, looking older and frailer than Lucy remembered. The reunion was awkward at first, with years of hurt and distance between them. But Clara and Will, oblivious to the complicated history, greeted their grandmother with the easy affection of children, and their presence helped ease the tension. Over the week of her visit, Margaret and Lucy had several long conversations. Margaret apologized sincerely for choosing her marriage over her daughter, admitting that fear and desperation had driven her to make terrible decisions. She told Lucy how proud she was of the life Lucy had built, and what a good man Wade clearly was. "Your father would be so proud of you," Margaret said one afternoon as they sat on the porch, watching Wade teach Clara and Will to rope a fence post. "You've done so well for yourself, and not because of what you married into, but because of who you are." "Thank you, Mama," Lucy said softly. It was the first time she had called her mother that since being thrown out, and Margaret's eyes filled with tears at hearing it. When Margaret left to return to Los Angeles, there was a sense of peace between them that had not existed before. They continued to write regularly, and Margaret visited twice more before she passed away in 1885. Lucy mourned her mother but was grateful that they had found their way back to each other, and that her children had known their grandmother, even if only briefly. The years continued to pass in a blur of activity and growth. Wade and Lucy added a third child to their family, another daughter they named Rose Alina, who arrived in 1886. Rose was a delicate, gentle child who looked exactly like Lucy and had a gift for music. Wade bought her a small piano when she was 5, sacrificing financially to do so because he wanted to nurture her talent. Clara grew into a strong, capable young woman who loved the ranch and often helped her father with the cattle. Will was more scholarly, showing an interest in books and learning that reminded Lucy of herself. Wade made sure all 3 children received a good education, hiring a tutor when the local school proved inadequate, and eventually sending Clara and Will to a proper school in San Bernardino when they were older. As the 1890s approached, the Cooper Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. Wade and Lucy had built something remarkable together, not just in terms of material success, but in the love and security they had created for their family. They employed several ranch hands now, had expanded their land holdings, and were respected members of their community. On their 15th wedding anniversary in 1894, Wade gave Lucy a beautiful locket containing tiny photographs of their 3 children. They sat on the porch that evening as they had so many times over the years, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "You ever think about that day I found you in town?" Wade asked, his arm around Lucy's shoulders. "Sometimes," Lucy admitted. "It feels like a lifetime ago and like yesterday all at once. I was so scared and lost." "You were the bravest person I'd ever met," Wade said. "You just lost everything, and yet you held your head up and kept going. I knew right then that you were special." "I thought you were either the kindest man in the world or completely crazy for offering your home to a stranger," Lucy said with a smile. "Maybe a little of both," Wade laughed. but it was the best decision I ever made. You gave me everything, Lucy. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just working the land. You made me whole. We made each other whole, Lucy corrected, leaning into his embrace. I never could have imagined on that terrible day that I would end up here with you with this life. It's more than I ever dared to hope for. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as their children played in the yard below. Clara was teaching her younger siblings a song, her voice carrying on the evening breeze. Will was attempting to dance, much to Rose's giggling delight. It was a perfect moment, one of thousands they had shared over the years. "My home is your home now," Wade said softly, repeating the words he had spoken so long ago. "That's what I told you that first day." "And you meant it," Lucy replied. "You gave me everything when I had nothing. You gave me love when I thought no one would ever love me. You gave me a family, a future, and a happiness I didn't know existed." Wade tilted her face up to his and kissed her gently. "You gave me all those things too. We saved each other, Lucy. That's what love does." As darkness fell and the children came inside, Lucy reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the girl she had been, desperate and alone, standing in the dust of San Bernardino with no idea where to turn. She thought about the man who had offered her everything without asking for anything in return. And she thought about the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. Clara eventually married a good man named Thomas Wright, a lawyer from San Bernardino who respected her intelligence and independence. They settled in town but visited the ranch often, and Clara continued to help with the books and business side of the operation. Will went to college in San Francisco, studying literature and history, before returning home to become a teacher. He built a small house on the far end of the Cooper property, wanting to stay close to his family while establishing his independence. Rose, true to her gentle nature, became a music teacher, giving lessons to children in San Bernardino and occasionally performing at church functions. She never married, content with her music and her close relationship with her family. She lived at the ranch well into adulthood, caring for her parents as they aged. Wade and Lucy became grandparents multiple times over, with Clara providing them with 4 grandchildren, and Will eventually marrying a sweet schoolteacher named Grace, and having 3 children of their own. The ranch house that had once been too large for one lonely cowboy was now frequently filled with the sounds of children playing, family dinners, and laughter. As they entered their 60s, Wade and Lucy gradually stepped back from the daily operation of the ranch, turning more responsibilities over to Tommy, who had become like a son to them, and his own sons who had grown up working the land. Wade's hair had gone silver and his face was weathered from decades in the sun, but his blue eyes still lit up every time he looked at Lucy. She had aged gracefully, her blonde hair now white, but her smile was as warm as it had been when she was young. They spent their days working in the garden Lucy still maintained, sitting on the porch watching their grandchildren play, and taking slow rides around the property on horses that were now as old and gentle as they were. They attended church every Sunday, hosted family dinners every other week, and continued to be active members of their community. In the spring of 1915, Lucy fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the doctor's best efforts and Wade's devoted care, she did not recover. On a quiet morning in April, surrounded by her husband, children, and grandchildren, Lucy Daniels Cooper passed away at the age of 59. Wade was devastated by her loss. For weeks, he moved through the house like a ghost, unable to find purpose without the woman who had been his partner for 37 years. His children worried about him, taking turns staying at the ranch to make sure he was eating and caring for himself. It was Clara who finally reached him. "Mama wouldn't want you to give up," she said gently one evening as they sat on the porch. "She would want you to keep living, to enjoy your grandchildren, to find joy in the life you built together." "I don't know how to do that without her," Wade admitted, his voice breaking. "She was everything to me." "Then honor her by continuing what she started," Clara urged. "Keep the garden she loved. Spend time with the family she created. Tell your grandchildren stories about her so they'll never forget how amazing she was. Live Papa. That's what she would want." Slowly, Wade began to heal. He never stopped missing Lucy, visiting her grave every week with fresh flowers from the garden they had tended together. But he also found ways to keep living, to find moments of happiness in watching his grandchildren grow. In tending the land he and Lucy had built into something remarkable, in sharing stories about his beloved wife with anyone who would listen. Wade lived for another 7 years after Lucy's death, remaining sharp and active well into his 70s. He passed away peacefully in his sleep in the late summer of 1922, at the age of 74. His children found him in his bed, a peaceful expression on his face and a photograph of Lucy clutched in his hand. They buried him next to Lucy in the small cemetery outside San Bernardino, their graves marked with simple headstones that bore their names, dates, and a single inscription that Clara had chosen. Together they built a home, a family, and a love that death could not diminish. The ranch stayed in the Cooper family, passed down through the generations. Clara's son eventually took it over, maintaining the traditions his grandparents had established while modernizing where necessary. The house was carefully preserved, with Lucy's garden still tended, and the porch where Wade and Lucy had spent so many evenings watching the sunset kept exactly as it had been. The story of how Wade Cooper found Lucy Daniels on the worst day of her life and gave her everything became family legend, passed down to each new generation. It was a story about kindness, about courage, about taking a chance on a stranger and finding the love of your life. It was a story about building something beautiful out of nothing, about creating a family and a legacy that would endure long after both of them were gone. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set behind the mountains and the breeze carried the scent of flowers from Lucy's garden, those who knew the story said you could almost see them there on the porch, Wade and Lucy, sitting together as they had for so many years, home at last in the place they had built with love. The legacy they created lived on not just in the land and the buildings, but in the values they had instilled in their children and grandchildren. The importance of kindness to strangers, of keeping your word, of working hard and treating others with respect. The belief that family was everything and that love could transform even the darkest situations into something beautiful. Decades later, when Clara's granddaughter married, she wore the simple gold band that had once belonged to Clara the elder and before her, to Lucy. The ring had been passed down through the women of the family, each one learning the story of the cowboy who gave everything to a woman who had nothing and the love they built together. The ranch house still stood strong nearly a century after Wade first brought Lucy there, carefully maintained by generations of Coopers who understood they were caretakers of something precious. Visitors to the property often commented on the sense of peace that seemed to permeate the place, as if the love Wade and Lucy had shared had somehow soaked into the very foundations. And so their story became more than just a tale of two people who found each other against impossible odds. It became a testament to what was possible when kindness met courage, when love was given freely without expectation of return, when two broken pieces came together and made each other whole. It was a reminder that sometimes the worst day of your life was just the beginning of the best chapter you never saw coming. And that home was not a place but a person who looked at you and said, without hesitation or doubt, "My home is your home now." The Cooper family never forgot that their prosperity, their happiness, and their very existence traced back to a single moment of compassion on a dusty street in San Bernardino, when a cowboy named Wade looked at a desperate young woman named Lucy and decided that he could not walk away. That decision changed both their lives and created a legacy of love that endured long after they were gone, a legacy that continued to inspire and guide those who came after them. In the end, that was the true measure of what they had built together, not the land or the cattle or the material success, but the love that had started it all and continued to ripple outward through the generations, touching lives that Wade and Lucy would never know but whose happiness was rooted in the choice they made to give each other everything. They had proven that family was not just about blood but about choice. That home was wherever you were loved and accepted for exactly who you were, and that the greatest wealth a person could possess was someone who looked at them on their worst day and saw only possibility, only worth, only home.